Okay, so welcome everybody. This is our 198th Reading Online Sports Economics Seminar. It's a great pleasure in the 198th to have a new presenter, Johnny Ducking from University of Mississippi. Hopefully you got the notification with the next few weeks of talks. Just to also say that we are sponsored by the Sports Economics Review at the Reading Sports Economics Seminar Series. If you do have a manuscript ready, please do send it. Consider the Sports Economics Review for your paper. Welcome to anyone joining us from the 11th Math Sport Conference in Luxembourg. And the other thing to say is if you are interested in presenting in the Roses series, there are some open sessions, open slots in August if you would like to present. So please do get in touch with me if you'd like to present or you know someone that would like to present. Johnny, you've got about an hour and a half in which to present, and hopefully you found the right slideshow. And if you have, then please do take away your talk.
Okay. Thanks, James, for inviting me. I appreciate the opportunity to present. I'll be presenting an examination of coaching tenure in women's Division I college basketball. Does the head coach's gender or race matter? And this is joint work with Pete Grotice at Appalachian State University and Joseph Nason, who's a grad student here at the University of Mississippi. So if we think about men's National Collegiate Athletic Association sports, so football, basketball, and baseball, there are no female head coaches. But yet when we look at women's Division I NCAA sports of basketball and softball, we see that there's a large percentage of men coaching in these sports. In addition, in NCAA football, 12% of head coaches are Black. In men's basketball, 30% are Black. In women's NCAA basketball, 18% of head coaches are Black. And so that brought on a question. Pete and I had some conversations. I was thinking about this project, and we started to think about what's going on here in women's basketball. So one question is, do men and women Division I head coaches in women's college basketball experience different tenure rates after controlling for performance? The next question is, do Black and white Division I head coaches in women's college basketball experience different tenure rates after controlling for performance? And the last piece of that is, do Black men, white men, Black women, and white women in Division I women's basketball experience different tenure rates after controlling for performance? And so there were a few ideas that we had going into this, but we leaned on the literature to see what's going on in women's sports. And Humphreys 2000 informs us that females actually earned 9% higher base salaries than male head coaches in women's college basketball. Now, in men's college basketball, the head coaches earned a lot more money. Now, remember, there are no women in men's college basketball. When we take a look at women's college basketball, Humphreys actually showed that females earned higher base salaries. Chalk et al. 2018, they analyzed Power 5 conferences and find no evidence that gender impacts the salary of coaches in women's college basketball. Larson and Clayton examined Division I college basketball and finds that race and gender play a role in determining the pathway that is required to become a head coach in women's college basketball. So in thinking about this, if race and gender determines the pathway, it could be that there's something different about the women and the Black coaches who get there because the pathway is different. Maybe they have more experience than other coaches who get there. And so maybe that could be part of the story. Cunningham, Bruning, and Staub found no difference in intention of being coaches. Greater turnover for Black coaches in both football and basketball for white coaches. Watson and Lavoie find no difference in the number of women who enter coaching by their genders, by their coach's gender. So if you think about your coach's gender, when you play a sport, they find no difference in how coach's gender influence those who go into coaching. Jepson 2023 finds that white and foreign-born players have a higher probability of exiting the NBA, the WNBA, after controlling for performance and demographics. And so when we look at this paper, we think about, okay, so what is it about the white and the foreign-born players that are allowing them to have a higher probability of exit? Similar, when we think about this project, why is it that we're going to find that women are having a lower probability of exit after controlling for performance? Kopkin 2014 uses data from major college football and finds that Black head coaches are 5.28% more likely to be fired than white head coaches. In this project, we're not able to identify the exact reason why the coach is leaving. Some of it could be due to coaches being fired. Some of it could be due to coaches being promoted. And some of it could be due to coaches just deciding to leave the job and pursue something else. And so I'll talk a little bit more about that in the end. Darvin et al. 2017 uses WNBA and women's college basketball data and finds that coaches' gender does not impact player performance. So we're using data from Sports Reference on Division I head coaches from 1982 to 2023. So this is a pretty long period of time. And so we have all of this information on these coaches in Division I college basketball. The data includes information on win percentage, wins, losses, experience, performance in the NCAA tournament, and whether you participate in a major conference or not. So about 63% of our sample is female, 37% is male, 82% is white, 18% is Black, and of our white male head coaches is about 31% of the sample, 6% of the sample are Black male head coaches, 51% are white female head coaches, and 12% are Black female head coaches. And so we see that the majority of the coaches in women's college basketball are indeed women. So 63% of the coaches here are women, but there are 37% of the head coaches in women's college basketball that are male. Now, remember, in men's college basketball, there are no males. And so if we think about that, just knowing that there's this opportunity for male head coaches to coach in women's college basketball as a head coach and to coach in women's college basketball as a head coach. And so there's fewer opportunities for women head coaches because they don't have that opportunity to coach in Division I men's basketball like the men do. Now, some may argue that the games are a little bit different, but others will argue that, a lot of the coaching techniques that are geared towards teaching men can be geared towards teaching women the sport of basketball. And so this just highlights that there are more opportunities for coaching for male head coaches than there are for female head coaches. Because if female head coaches want to coach in Division I basketball, they're relegated to coaching women's college basketball. But men have the opportunity to coach in men's or women's college basketball. So we have information on 369 teams, 64 conferences. There are 8 major conferences and 56 non-major conferences in the data set. So if we just take a look at some descriptive statistics here, see about 63% of the sample are female. We have information on exit by female head coaches, male head coaches, and all the head coaches. Those means appear to be similar. We have information on experience, win percentage. Just looking at this, we notice that male head coaches actually have a higher winning percentage than females. We're looking at wins, and we're seeing that male head coaches are having more wins on average than females. Females are having, on average, more losses. And we're taking a look at these tournament measures. And when we think about these tournament measures, if you made it to the Final Four, your dummy variable for Final Four equals 1 and 0 otherwise. Now, if a team made it to the Final Four, they also made it to the Elite Eight. But this dummy variable is capturing the furthest you went in the NCAA tournament. So if the team went to the Final Four, it's 1 if they made it to the Final Four, and then it's 0 for those other dummy barrels for Elite Eight, Sweet 16, second round, first round. Even though they played in those rounds, this dummy barrel was captured the furthest you went in the NCAA tournament. Okay? So, and thinking about it that way, we see that for female head coaches, about 7.6% of them, the farthest that they made it was the first round. For male head coaches, about 9.5% of the observations, the furthest they made it was the first round. We can look at the second round, and we see that about 4% of the female coaches, the farthest they went was the second round. And for males, that's a little higher with 4.6%. When we look at the Sweet 16, we see that for females, the mean is about 2.1%. And for males, it's about 2%. And we can look at Elite Eight and Final Four as well. For those measures, it's a little less than 1% for males and females in terms of the farthest they're making it is the Elite Eight. And for the Final Four, we see that females make it a little less than 1%. Males make it a little more than 1% to the Final Four. Okay. And so to help you to understand tenure duration of coaches, we calculate the yearly hazard functions where H of T is equal to D of T over N of T, where D is simply the number of coaches who enter their tenure in year T, and N is the number of coaches at risk of ending their tenure in year T. So let's think about the first year. So there's a number of coaches that start in the beginning of their first year, and then there are a number of coaches whose tenure ends after that first year. Okay? So D is the number of coaches whose tenure ends after that year. So we can think about this hazard rate for different years, and we'll take a look at this. We have this broken down by females and males. And one thing I want to show you is we see that the longest tenured female head coach in the data is about 42 years. The longest tenured male head coach is about 39 years. And we show this hazard rate for the first 15 years here. What I want to do is I want to show you this information, the same information on a graph, and we can look at this exit rate. So we see the females is the blue line, the male line is the orange line, and we see these hazard rates. And if we just look at how many times the blue line is higher than the orange line, we'll see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So basically 9 out of these 15, out of the 15, out of the first 15 years, the females have a higher hazard rate, just higher hazard rate than the males in our data set. And so you can see that a little clearer when we look at these numbers, but this diagram shows us that information as well. And so just looking at these raw numbers, it appears that females are having a higher exit rate than males. But right now, we're not controlling for anything. We're just looking at the raw numbers, and we see that basically 9 out of the first 15 years, females have a higher exit rate than males. So we can also take a look at this by race. So if we split the data between white and black, we can look at the exit rates, and we have a similar diagram. So if we look at this diagram, we see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So roughly, let's see. So it's roughly 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So roughly 10 of the 15 years here, you see the orange line is higher than the blue line, which indicates that 10 of the 15 years here, black coaches have a higher exit rate than white coaches. Again, we're not controlling for anything yet. We're just looking at the exit rate by race. Now we can look at this exit rate by race and gender. And so we see the exit rate for white males, white females, black males, and black females for head coaches in Division I women's college basketball we have a similar diagram here that shows us this information. And we can look at this, and if you're just glancing at it, it appears that Black males, if we look at the green line, is roughly higher 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times. So out of the 15 years, it appears just looking at these simplistic calculations for these exit rates that Black males have the highest exit rate in 7 out of the 15 years. Now, what we use here is a technique developed by Berger and Black in 1998 to estimate a duration model of stock and flow data. So we have some observations that are left censored. We have some observations that are right censored. But given the long period of our sample, we have a lot of complete observations. We have a lot of complete careers for these coaches. But there are some that are right censored and there are some that are left censored. So we estimate semi-parametric hazard functions following Berger and Black 1998, Berger et al. 2004, Groteis and Hill 2004, 2008, 2013, and 2018 used this technique. Duncan et al. 2015, Depkin et al. 2017, Duncan and Groteis 2023, and Jepson 2023 all employed this technique that we're going to use here. So we calculate our hazard model as a discrete random variable because we have season level data. We use this technique to incorporate both the left and right censored careers. So as a hazard function is the conditional probability of a head coaching job, of exiting a head coaching job, given that the head coaching job lasted into the previous season, the hazard function must have a range from 0 to 1. And so in principle, any mapping with a range from 0 to 1 will work. But we follow Cox 1972, but instead of using his traditional dummy variable method, we use a Taylor series approximation because there are some careers where there's just not a lot of observations for the very long tenures. Like there's not a whole lot of coaches who had 42 years or 39 years. And so instead of using Cox's traditional dummy variable approach, we use a Taylor series approximation. Now, if we take a look at our results here, we see that win-loss percentage is going to reduce the probability of exit. Now, when we think about this, winning appears to be a good thing if it comes to keeping your job. If you're a coach, it seems like winning should be pretty important. But we also need to keep in mind that if you're a coach and you're winning a lot, that could potentially be an incentive for you to leave and go somewhere else. So going into this, when we think about win-loss percentage, we were mostly thinking that, okay, winning should likely reduce the probability of exit, but we had to keep the possibility alive that there are coaches who win a lot, and they have the opportunity to move up to different coaching jobs. So, but when we estimate the model, we find the coefficient on winning is negative and significant, which is probably what most would think it would be, but we wanted to make sure that everyone understands and is aware of the possibility that winning in some cases could actually lead to an exit because you're so successful at your current position, that gives you an opportunity somewhere else. And so I want to talk about that a little bit more here and now because currently we don't have the reason why the coach left. We don't know if you were fired. We don't know if you just simply resigned because you wanted to do something different. We don't know if you left because you got an opportunity at a better university. That's something that we're thinking about trying to figure out how to incorporate in future iterations of the paper. But for now, what we do know is winning is statistically significant and is negative. So for the sample we have here, winning appears to reduce the probability of exit. But we just want to make sure it's clear that there is this possibility, at least in some cases, that winning actually lead to coaches leaving and going somewhere else. One thing that we've been thinking about is trying to capture whether the head coach goes to a new job in a higher rated conference, but that can still be a little tricky because if you think about conferences in Division I women's college basketball, even if there's a really good conference, if a coach moves from, say, a really good team and a poor conference to a bad team and a good conference, is that really a promotion? So it's hard to categorize sometimes whether these jobs are better jobs or not. And so we're still thinking about ways to do that. If there are any suggestions at the end here, we're more than happy to take those because we're looking for a way to capture whether coaches are leaving and going to better jobs, worse jobs, maybe even capturing if they're leaving and don't go immediately into a new head coaching job. We're not considering those things right now. But right now, we see that winning percentage actually reduces the probability of exit. We see that being a female reduces the probability of exit. We find no statistical significance, no statistical significant effect of being white. If we look at making it to the NCAA tournament first round, if that's the farthest you make it, that's statistically significant and reducing the probabilities of an exit. That seems to make sense that if a coach is doing well, they lead their team to the NCAA tournament. And even if they exit after the first round, they're more likely to return the next year. If we look at the NCAA tournament second round, we also see a negative coefficient. We see, so if a coach leads their team to the second round of the NCAA tournament, there's going to be a lower probability of exit. But when we look at the Sweet 16, the Elite Eight, and the Final Four, we can't find a statistically significant effect. And that's likely related to the fact that when coaches do really, really well, there's this incentive for their current teams to want to keep them, but there's also this incentive for other teams to try to lure those coaches away. So if there are these coaches out here making it to the Sweet 16 and to the Elite Eight and to the Final Four, then there's this opportunity for other teams to try to lure their services away. So we find no statistical significant impact of the Sweet 16, Elite Eight, and Final Four. But if you look at the Sweet 16, the best estimate that we have, it is negative. It's just not statistically significant. But when you get to the Final Four, our best estimate is positive. And so it could be that those coaches who are making it to the Final Four, some of them are getting opportunities to leave, but that's not statistically significant. But I think that's a part of the story that we need to keep in mind. Okay. So when we look at the model, and so in the first model here, we see we have a female dummy, we have a white dummy. But now we want to look at the model in terms of isolating the impact of being a black male or a white female or a black female. And here the base group is going to be a white male. So now when we look at this, what we notice is white females have a lower probability of exit than white males. Black females have a lower probability of exit than white males. And although it's not statistically significant, our best guess is black males have a lower probability of exit than white males. And thinking about this, we were wondering, is it possible that white males may have more opportunities? So we're still trying to figure out why is it the case, or what is leading to the fact that these other groups have a lower probability of exit than white males. So we find that win percentage, making the first round and making the second round of the NCAA women's basketball tournament lowers the probability of exit. These results suggest that the exit of coaches is more likely a dismissal than a quit. And so we we say that we're not 100% certain here, but the fact that winning in the first round and winning in the second round is leading to a lower probability of exit, it seems like if these coaches are leaving, it's possible that they're being pushed out instead of voluntarily leaving. But we don't have clear evidence of that right now. We don't have a clear variable to indicate that. We find that there is statistically an economically lower probability of exit for female coaches than for male coaches. We find there is no statistically significant influence of race on the exit of coaches. When compared to white males, we find that there is a statistically and economically lower probability of exit for both Black female coaches and white female coaches, with Black female coaches exhibiting the largest difference. So when compared to white males, we find there is neither a statistical nor economic difference in exit for Black male coaches. To understand the magnitude of the effects, we just simply transform the coefficients. And what we find is, looking at the influence of gender, when beta is negative 0.139, there is roughly a 13% lower probability of exit. If we look at white females compared to white males, there is roughly a 12% lower probability of exit. Focusing on Black females compared to white males, there's a 20% lower probability of exit. And so in looking at these numbers, one thing that comes to mind is if there are different pathways for males and females to get to these positions, or even Blacks and whites to get to these positions, maybe it's something about the pathway that the white and Black females are going through that make them a better fit for these positions, which in turn decrease their probability of exit. And so we haven't really pinned down exactly what's going on, but that's one story or one potential narrative that could explain why we're seeing these lower probabilities of exit for women. So males could have more outside opportunities to move from coaching women's basketball to men's basketball. That's one option. We're also looking at data to try to see if we can capture that in any way to get any information about, do we actually see males moving in between men's and women's basketball? That will provide us with some additional information. Right now, we don't have much information on whether men are actually moving in between the two, but we know it's possible for men to move between the two because there are men and women coaching women's Division I college basketball, but we know at least in the past, it hasn't been possible for women to move it in between the two sports. Females coaching the same gender could be more effective mentors and coaches. So that's one thing we're trying to look at in the literature to see if that could be what we're picking up, that females are more solidified in these positions because it's something related to mentorship, or if they have some connection with female athletes that males don't have. And we're thinking about other potential stories to explain what's going on here. Our next steps are to consider an alternative model specification or alternative model specifications that account for coaches moving to worse programs, better programs, or similar programs, because leaving, as I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of different reasons why you would want to leave. Maybe you just prefer living in a different location. That could be a reason, even if it's a lateral move. But, for some of these programs, it may be a reasonable assumption to think that the only reason that they would leave is if they were fired, but that may not be true for all of these programs. Like if you're at your dream job, maybe it's true in that situation that the only way you leave is if you're dismissed or fired. But there are a lot of other programs where there could be many other reasons why you would leave other than a forced exit. We're considering examining whether males or females are more likely to be fired or resign from their head coaching position. And another thing we want to do is look at changes in coaching over time. So have we seen more males or more females or more black males or more black females coaching over time? So we're thinking about looking into that a little more. So thank you. That's all I have to present. I'm open to any questions and any suggestions that you have to help us move forward on this research project.
Great. Thank you very much, Johnny. I'm going to give you the obligatory team's round of applause. And there's a few others there, which is good to see. Thank you. That was a really interesting talk on coach tenure in women's basketball. We've got plenty of time for questions and comments. So if you do have any questions or comments, please do raise your hand.
Let me see.
We've got Georgie, first of all.
All right, go ahead, Georgie.
Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation. Very interesting topic. So you mentioned this towards the beginning of the presentation. You also wrapped this up in the next steps. In terms of the different categories of coaches, like what would you hypothesize happen in terms of, let's again, like in your specification, have white male be the control, the comparison group? And then what would happen to the other three groups in terms of different strata of divisions, like meaning Power 5 versus non-Power 5, as in if I am, say, a female, right, any female, and I'm having a winning season in a Power 5 conference, like am I less likely to move to change positions than if I, say, were in a non-Power 5 conference? So things of that sort, like what would you hypothesize happen when you undertake the next steps?
So I would hypothesize that coaches in a Power 5 conference would probably have a lower probability of exiting due to winning or success than coaches in some of the smaller conferences. Because if you're in a Power 5 conference, presumably you're competing against some of the best teams in the country. And if you're competing against some of the best teams in the country and you're doing well, it seems like you'll have an opportunity to be as successful as you could possibly be in that environment. And as successful as you could possibly be, I'm saying that's winning the national title. But if you're in a non-Power 5 conference, and even if you're winning a lot, the probability of you winning a national title, even if you're dominating your conference every year, may not be as high. So if you're doing really well in a non-Power 5 conference, my guess is you may have an incentive to leave that program, even if you're winning, say, 70, 80, 85% of your games. And those dismissals wouldn't be due to, and those dismissals or those tenures ending wouldn't be due to firing. I would guess that those exits would be due to coaches voluntarily deciding that, hey, I have a better opportunity. But if you're already in a Power 5, you're already in a place where you can compete at the highest level. So I'll posit that coaches from these lower conferences would likely have a higher probability of exit as they win more. So maybe something like interacting small conferences with win percentage and seeing if that matter. Because I think that those individuals can do more in terms of their national recognition and their potential of winning a national title. But if you're already in a Power 5 conference, if you're dominating that conference or doing well in that conference, or get your team to the point where they can dominate that conference, even if you take over when they're not that good, you're already in a good position to be successful in terms of the ultimate goal of winning a national title. So does that answer your question, Georgia?
Yeah, very well, thank you. And then, so just to reiterate, you don't think there's going to be any differences? So the differences are going to be mainly driven by the conferences, or if you will, the strata of classification of where you are in terms of the proximity to winning the national title. And in terms of the four groups that you specify, the four groups of coaches, that will not differ. Like they will all behave the same and not exhibit, like, say, different loyalty to the program that hired them in the first place. Because I would think if you're a minority coach, you absolutely know that you're a minority coach, and you would not want to change positions as quickly as, say, someone like a John Calipari, changing different schools here and there. So
So another thing to think about, Georgie, is that we can do that I didn't mention is we can control for the percent of the population that's Black, the percent of the percent of the population that's white, uh, and think about how that may influence whether a coach, would stay at a place or leave a place, because that can matter as well. Because there may be preferences about certain locations in terms of, the coach's opinions about those places.
Yeah, George, I think you brought up some good concerns. I think probably one of the easiest ways to approach that is to see what the breakdown of races are between the major conferences and the lesser, I guess, the minor conferences, because we haven't done a means in the two. Is there more female coaches in the top? Or are there more in the bottom? That's something that we should definitely do. And I could see we could also interact and see if there's a difference by being in a major conference in terms of how long you last in tenure. So thanks for the comments.
No, thank you.
Thanks, Georgie. More questions and comments?
All right, Brad, go ahead.
Hey, Johnny, good to see you.
Good to see you, Brad. How you doing?
Good. So have you thought about differences in state income taxes as a factor that might be driving these moves?
No, I haven't for this project, but I'm actually looking at a project with Eddie and Camden that's doing some of that. So I didn't think about that. So we could consider that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there is, like you said, there's other evidence that might drive changes. A lot of it just is players and not coaches, but the incentives are the same there, right? There's just lots of states with no income tax or really low state income tax. So that might be a thing to add to the paper. It's interesting work,
Okay.
though. Thanks.
Thanks, Brad. I appreciate the comment.
Thanks, Brad. More comments? I'll ask a quick question, which probably shows that I didn't follow very well what you were saying, Johnny. But obviously, you're talking about, I guess, you're talking about the fact you can't distinguish between sackings and quits, essentially. But I wondered whether can you follow coaches through their career? Do they move around to different places, like, say, coaches in European football, so you could trace them and you could use the gap between an appointment to get a sense of whether it was a sacking and therefore they had to then, go on the job market again and find a new position versus, they quit to move to somewhere else quite quickly. I don't know whether you might be able to infer anything from the time between different jobs if you had that kind of information.
So we can get that information. So we can take a look at the time in between jobs, because we have the coaches. So we have data on basically every year that the coach coached in Divisions I women's basketball. And from that, we can see if there's a gap between coaching appointments. And there are several coaches, I didn't present the number, there are several coaches that appear in the data at different institutions. And we can look at the time in between those appointments, and we can see if that tells us anything. But one thing that I was concerned about, though, because we're not sure why they're leaving, if I'm the head coach at, say, a small conference school, it's possible that I leave my small conference to go become an assistant at one of the best programs in America before I become a head coach again. So I think that can tell us something, and I think we should explore that. But it may be still a little difficult to differentiate between me leaving because I did horrible at my last coaching job and I needed some time to rebuild my reputation and go somewhere else. But I think maybe the place where you end up as a head coach could somehow influence that. Like if we can somehow come up with a measure of these programs, maybe not ranking the programs, but maybe putting the programs in different groups, and say if you move from a lower group to a higher group versus moving from a higher group to a lower group, I think that can tell us something.
Yeah. Time for any more questions and comments? Well, it looks like at the moment that's a no. So thank you, Johnny. Thank you, Pete. Really interesting piece of work, and wish you well as you develop it. Hopefully the questions and comments and the experience presenting have been useful for you. We won't meet next week, so there's no talk next week, June 13th. But there will be a talk on June the 20th, and that will be by Maxence Franceschi from the University of Lausanne on the effect of interpersonal competition on employee turnover and employee valuation, evidence from professional football. So shall hopefully see you all in a couple of weeks' time, and wish you all a fantastic weekend and time in between.
Thanks, James.
Thank you,
Cheers,
James.
Pete. Cheers, Johnny.
Take care.
You too.
Bye. Thanks.